Hey everybody, we are doing our first ever live Lessons of the Woods podcast. So we're going to see how this goes. It might go very well, it might go very poorly. We're going to find out because that's how we roll. If you haven't watched our other podcasts, you should know that this podcast comes out every Friday at 7 p.m. This is the first time it's live. It can be found on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, a bunch of other podcast apps. It can be found just about anywhere. So, we are here to talk about deer and deer hunting. Not the magazine, but whitetail deer, deer hunting, tips, tricks, strategies, property management. And we do have two questions that were asked of us to answer on today's podcast. Should we jump right into those and then see where we end up?
That'd be fine.
If you guys listening have any questions, go ahead and ask them, and we'll work our way through a bunch of questions as we go.
What was the first one, Dylan?
The first one. So Bruce Taylor asks that we talk about food plots that are small or have limited space. Now, Kyle, I know you have a lot of experience in that area out at Wits End.
Yeah, we have 3 microplots, what we call them. And it's really a trick of sunlight. So first step I did with setting up a microplot was kind of trying to clear out some canopy. I ended up taking down a couple trees and tilling up the soil. But if you don't mess with the canopy at all, you're going to have a hard time with smaller microplots. But I took out a couple trees, got the canopy just a hair open, just a little bit of sunlight, just a little more, so the trees aren't actually choking out the seed that you plant. If it's small, you can use a rake. I use a little toe behind disc that goes over behind my side-by-side, which I would call small equipment in comparison to a tractor or something bigger. Then I still, even though I opened up a little bit of canopy, I still plant something that is shade tolerant. And usually you got to check your pH when you have a shady spot because it hasn't had sunlight for a long time. So not a lot of stuff is growing in a long time. So your soils can be a little messed up. But disc it up, plant some shade tolerant seed, and it can be a great spot to stage bucks. So if you have a big destination food source, does will come out, fawns will come out, smaller bucks will come out. And then usually at last light or last in pecking order, the bigger bucks will come out. That's because they've staged off a couple 100 yards off of the food plot. And they're watching, they're seeing what's going on, see who's out there, see if they want to mess with them. If it's not the dominant buck, they're going to check, see if the dominant buck is out there. But if you have these microplots, you just expedite all of those motions. He might come in after all the does and younger bucks are in the big food plot, and he might grab something to eat out of that microplot. And you might get him 10, 15 minutes earlier than you would even have a chance at him on the big food plot. So these microplots can be super beneficial if the microplot is less intrusive and close to their bedding. They might get up at that 10 o'clock or that second feeding. So you have 5 feedings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can, at your second feeding, which is at that 9:30, 10:30, depending on where you're at, what's going on. They get up out of their bed, they stretch, they work their body out a little bit, move around. And they're not going to go to a destination food plot. They're just going to go grab a bite, eat some buds, relax, and then they're going to bed right back down. They're not going to move far from their bedding. But some of these microplots, being very less intrusive, they can get right up close to a bedding area. So they might get up, come out to this microplot, graze, and move back for a short time, 5 minutes, maybe a little less. But that's an opportunity for you to be hunting and get daylight pictures. A lot of our daylight pictures this summer and fall came from our microplots that were close to bedding because they come up at 10 o'clock and come close but they're not going to travel that destination food plot until the fourth and fifth feeding. So I love microplotting, and you can map it out really well on your land. You have a lot of different places to hunt. When people call us about properties and they have 100 acres, 120 acres, but they want to sit 5 people, microplotting is a great way to do that because everybody has a stand. Now, them deer are going to circle. They're going to cycle through those microplots, but it gives everybody a stand that they're not watching the same field or cut. And you can notice, even now I have the microplots and I have the big plot. I have deer that are visiting the microplot, digging up stuff that aren't even close to the destination food plot. They're not even touching it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're to the north and they're staying to the north. The south side, the destination food, is the camera's not even getting pictures of that animal. So you can almost create where their core zone is with microplotting. So
yeah, so microplotting gives you that advantage on hunting. You can catch the deer moving through. If they're on their way to a destination food source, it does add food to your woods. It's tough to make that your ultimate food source if you have a high deer population. But there's a lot of ways to do it. It's fairly easy to go out with a rake, and especially in a woods without a lot of underbrush, rake back the leaves. You got soil right there ready to plant. Just hopefully you can get either enough sunlight in there or a plant that does well in the shade to succeed in that type of environment.
Yep. And I mean, you can play with shapes. You can. So here's another trick, and I would consider this microplotting. But trails, corridors, I have a bunch of old logging trails on my property that I haven't this year, but I want to plant all of those trails in a shade-tolerant seed. Because what that does, if it's 8 feet wide by 100 feet long, that's 800 square feet. That's tonnage. That's food. It's not a big, beautiful food plot to hunt on, but if they're browsing, if you're just talking about needing tonnage, and at wit's end, we needed tonnage, that's a great way to do it. Mow it down, scrape it up, use the disc, turn up a little bit, get a very aggressive, shade-tolerant seed that doesn't need a ton of sun, doesn't need a ton of moisture, doesn't need a ton of upkeep. I'm talking Roundup, de-weeder, just stuff that can just grow. It's just hardy. Maybe it's not the most desirable thing for that deer, but it's something as they browse across, they're going to take a bite. Them deer are up and moving. They're constantly nibbling, grabbing, ooh, I don't taste that. I don't like that. Ooh, I like that. And they're just going to graze through. So a nice meandering trail, logging trail through the woods is a quick and easy way to get tonnage in your woods, micro-plotting, without having a circle or a shape of a food plot. Also, if you have that logging road and it's food, they might pop out, walk that meandering trail. I recommend it not be straight so they can just see 500 yards down the road. Mm-hmm. But a nice meandering trail down that, they might use that all the way down. And if you can have that bump out to your destination food plot at 30 yards, poof, they pop out off that trail, off that grazing trail, basically, pop out onto your destination food plot. You have a 30-yard shot, or you can establish what that animal is, what that buck is, if you want to harvest him. If you see him at 30 yards, you can let him, and you don't want him, you can let him graze and work the food plot and work his way out of there. Otherwise, the first time you see him, which is the most likely time he's not spooked, he is not catching on to you, not getting your wind, right when he pops out, you can establish whether you're shooting or not right then and there. Mm-hmm. I would always like one that doesn't come straight towards me, one that kind of cuts from my right to left or left to right. That way they're broadside. I can't see them till they're right there when then I establish a shot. So the big food plot does that. I have 2 trails to the left and 1 trail to the right. And those deer, basically if they come from the left, the farther left to right they go, the tighter they have to get to me. So once they pop out, every step forward, going left to right, is increasing my shot probability, but also increasing my quality of a shot, shortening the distance, et cetera, et cetera. So, and Ace did that. He did it. He wrote the script. I wrote the script. He read the script perfectly. He came from the tight alley to the berm, walked up. He stopped at about 25 yards. At that point, the wind was coming over my left shoulder, over to my right shoulder, basically. So that was kind of the angle. Maybe 2 o'clock, if I'm noon, 2 o'clock. And I let him get to 11. And that's when I took my shot. So even though wind was not in my favor, my scent control was good. That doe that was at 2 o'clock didn't bust me. So he knew he was safe, but I definitely had my opportunity if I wanted to take it before he could pop me or bust me. So, but setting up those alleys and the microplots create this grazing, meandering trail can be a great way to get some tonnage and create shots. So,
lots of uses for them and lots of ways to do them, for sure. And that's something that we're going to continue to utilize going forward, just because it can help so much, especially in an area where you don't have a lot of food sources or access to a lot of equipment. So there's a lot of good options there.
Yeah, and microplotting, in my opinion, you can't do microplotting if you bring in a big tractor with a 3-point. And I say that you can't because now you're not microplotting. I'm talking microplotting, which starts with you take a shade-tolerant seed, you walk out there with a rake, scrape all the leaves, kill a bunch of the loose grass, loosen soil, and then you plant and you walk away. Up to a side-by-side or ATV with a disc or a scratcher or a aerator, something low equipment, low impact. Yes, I told you I messed with my canopy. I took a chainsaw. I didn't want to mess with noise, so I took an electric chainsaw batteries, made 2 easy cuts, and dropped the 4 trees out. But those were the minimum I had to take down to open up the canopy. So I'm talking
just opening it up a little bit makes a huge difference.
Little, and what you have to realize too, when you do these clearings like this, the edges of this canopy that's open are going to thicken up because all of a sudden there's this burst of sunlight. So twigs are going to grow. If you cut down a little 3-inch round popple, all the shoots that are going to come off that stump if the canopy's open, that's food. That's browse for them. That's woody browse for the deer. So, but yeah, microplotting, in my opinion, is from a rake to a side-by-side. That's the limit. If you start bringing a tractor in and having that kind of equipment, you're not necessarily microplotting anymore.
You're food plotting.
Yeah, and if you have that equipment there, go bigger. I mean, you need the tonnage, or you want that draw.
You can't overfeed your deer.
They can't.
You can't overfeed them. The more food you have available, the better the happier they're going to be. Speaking of food, deer are food for predators, which kind of leads right into our second topic that we were asked to discuss tonight. Scott Penner asks how to protect your deer herd from predators, from wolves, bears, and coyotes. Biggest issue is the unmanaged wolf population, which we've discussed that before more than once, but we can discuss it again. And is there any way to manipulate your land to help the deer herd in that aspect? Kill predators. If you love to hunt whitetail deer, go hunt some coyotes. There's lots of resources online to find for how to call in coyotes, and it can be done very efficiently, economically, right? I mean, you can get a mouth call for coyotes for $20 and then watch a few videos and learn how to call and see if they come in. Or better yet, roadkill deer in your area. If you see a roadkill, it's as simple as calling the sheriff's department saying, hey, there's a dead deer here. Can I take it? And the sheriff can issue you a salvage tag or whatever they want to call it, and you grab the deer, throw it in the back of your pickup, haul it out to your property. Now that seems counterintuitive, right? You don't want a dead animal on your property to lure coyotes in, but if you have an area on your property or somewhere local to that, it's not that hard to bring in a carcass to set up to either trap, snare, or shoot coyotes. And there's very, very few rules on coyotes on how you can take them. So That's super simple to do. But other things that we've talked about in the past, as far as how to help your property for deer to be able to come in, a big one is bedding, or for deer to be able to hide from the coyotes. So you've talked about bedding and setting it up where they kind of have a way out, or a visual, breaking up that visual we've talked about before. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, the question's relatively simple until he gets to the end of his question, right? So, like you said, hunt, 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 hunt. If you're a deer hunter, become a coyote hunter, become a trapper. Those things will. Bobcats do a lot more damage than people give them credit for. Like I said in Wisconsin to Dylan the other day, Wisconsin's a little harder to get a bobcat tag, but yeah, if you like deer hunting, be a predator hunter also. That's the best thing. Now, wolf hunting is an issue because it's federally protected. You can't have a wolf season. We had one wolf season. And it went great, and the hunters felt that they were empowered to control that solution. Okay, they felt empowered, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise. They were empowered to control that, and that's what hunters wanted with that wolf hunt. It's not about we want to kill the wolves; we want to have a say. When you have a picture of 5 or 6 wolves drinking out of the same pond, that's telling you there's an issue. I don't see a lot of wolves. I'm not saying wolves aren't in Wisconsin or in Bayfield County, but we don't see a lot. They come in, then they go. They're moving around. So, anyways, but the second half of the latter part of his question is, how do you manipulate the land? In our podcast for bedding, which was 2, 3, I don't remember. But
one of the ones we've done before.
What we talked about was this deer is bedded. He wants to know. He wants to see forward. He wants to feel back. He wants to feel against something. But he also wants to know if he all of a sudden sees a hunter or a wolf or a coyote or a bobcat, he would prefer an area where he can make 3 bounds, be 100 yards away, and be completely gone. In the idea of visual, right? So as a hunter, we're tromping through the woods, being loud as ever with a gun. If that buck can take 3 bounds, be 50 yards away, and be in a completely different view from us, that's what they want. So when it comes to manipulating your property, yeah, make it thick. That's what they want. They want edges. They want thick. And maybe people argue with me about this, but a coyote doesn't just take down a deer. He doesn't walk up, grab him, throw him on the ground, eat him. The deer runs. The deer can be faster. They can avoid these deer. Deer can avoid these coyotes and wolves for the most part.
Short periods of time.
Yes, a coyote and a wolf can run for a long time. A deer can run fast for a short time. Mm-hmm. So if they have to go clear across the field, a wolf or a coyote is probably going to win.
Yeah, there's a old story I heard on this real quick that just fits in perfectly right here. In raising whitetails, we found that the farthest you can chase a white-tailed deer, trying to move them from one pen to another, they got about 1.5 miles before they will lay down and look at the four-wheeler. As we drive right up to them, they're like, I can't do this anymore. 1.5 miles, I'm done. Older outlaws would say you can chase a coyote or a timber wolf 7-8 miles on a snowcat in the winter, and they'll stop and look at you and keep running. So they can definitely outrun a white-tailed deer.
Yep. So you want that deer to be able to get 100. I mean, a mile's a lot, but you want that deer to be able to get in there and hide. That's how I have a bunch of pictures of bobcats and coyotes and stuff coming through my camera. Within an hour, the deer are in there. So it's not like a coyote or a wolf walking through, spooks out 400 acres, and there's no deer for a month. It's not necessarily. They just move. They just rotate around each other. But there's pictures of deer on a food plot looking at a coyote. The coyote looks at that deer and goes, I don't have a chance. That deer's like, I'm going to run, but you got to show aggression toward. So it's not just this walk up, bite, take down, die. Like, it's not that simple for the coyote. But what also happens is when the winter comes and the snow gets deep, the deer trails are packed down. The deer can run that trail. And let's just say they are faster than the coyote. If the coyote or wolf can push them off the trail into 3 or 4 feet of snow, now that deer with this much square footage of hoof, with this little dinky leg is now post-holing through crust, 3 feet of snow, dragging their belly, punching a hole like this through the snow. Now that wolf or coyote can run right behind it with undisturbed ground. I mean, just like a clear running path. Who's going to run faster? Me and Dylan, let's race. I'll put 50-pound ruck bag on my back and run with 50 pounds dragging on me. Who's going to catch me eventually? Dylan, I would assume. So that's the trick that happens, and that's why winter kill can be so hard, because now the coyotes, and then if the crust is thick enough, the wolf and coyote can run right across the top. Bobcat, right across the top. What's the deer going to do? So it's not as simple. Kyle can just take down a deer, but it is a fact that winter is harder on them. Summer, they probably have all the advantage of the world. The deer do.
A little bit,
They can bound out of here and get away and avoid and keep some distance from them, but coyote's going to eat. So fawns, they eat. Injured deer, man, if you wound a deer with an arrow or make a bad shot in their gut and they're just not doing well, there's no chance for them. You've given the coyote the edge at that point. And that's why it's really important to do good ethical hunts or good ethical shots. You want to shoot that animal. You don't want it to suffer. You want it to clean kill. It goes down. You want to recover that animal fast. One, so you can process the meat, no spoils, none of that. But also it doesn't go to waste or suffer for hours or 6 or 8 or 10 hours and be eaten by a predator. But to the manipulating the land, yes, I would definitely say, thicken it up, clear canopy, create edges, create safe zones, and give the deer as much of an advantage as possible. If you feed deer, which in Wisconsin you can do 2 gallons, sounds like in Minnesota you can do just about whatever you want, as long as you're not hunting.
Depending on the area, some areas you still can, some areas you can't. Kittson County right now, it is legal to feed white-tailed deer, so you can feed them as much as you want, and that can be dumping out an entire semi-load of corn. You can feed them. They haven't put any restrictions on that yet. Because
CWD only is affected during hunting season. Anybody watching that?
Correct.
That's sarcasm. Obviously, CWD. Anyways, but you can plow. If you're gonna feed in this if you got a field and you're gonna feed right there, take the tractor or take the truck and plow. Give them a good, because without snow they have an advantage. They can't be in a.
And if you can't plow, you don't have access to a plow, go walk your deer trails. Seriously, if you get a foot of snow, go walk around your deer trails for half a day. Walk every one of them that you can see, and you're basically clearing a trail, because they only need a trail this wide, and they can run full speed down that trail, no problem. So just by doing that little bit, you're helping your wild deer be able to move faster and get away from predators. Because even if you drive down the highway and suddenly there's a deer in front of you in the winter, what do? They'll run down the shoulder of the road 200-300 yards to get to a trail into the woods, because they know that you will catch them in that ditch if they're not on a trail.
Yep. They can't punch through the snow like that, or they shouldn't.
Yeah.
They can get exhausted relatively fast doing it that way. So, but it's a good question. I mean, we talk about manipulating the land all the time to benefit the deer, but manipulate the land to protect the animals, the deer, from predators. That's a good thought. Another factor, which is something I learned actually from Dylan and Steve, was not gutting the deer on the property. You guys at the deer farm bring the deer in, everything included, and pull them out. You don't leave gut piles in there. You're refusing to leave something to draw coyotes, wolves, bobcats inside your guys' fence, which makes sense. Everybody thinks I'm crazy not doing it at my land, but in all reality, I mean, I'm just not giving them another reason to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to set up to cleanly gut an animal inside. Actually, a lot of people don't like to do it inside. It makes a mess, whatever. It's as simple as buying a $25 roll of plastic at your hardware store, rolling out a 8-foot by 5-foot piece on your floor, and then just flopping the guts onto that. And if you have a floor drain in your garage or shop, hose it down when you're done. It's all cleaned up. You got the guts in a big garbage bag, ready to be disposed of in whatever fashion you deem disposable. And that does get into some legal issues, actually. I know some counties and states with CWD, they require you to leave the guts on the property where the deer was harvested to not transmit CWD from one area to another. So that's something that a person would have to look into.
Yeah, I mean, we can get on that CWD rant all we want.
We could. We really could.
But I just want to, I just say I don't leave anything out there for any reason for a coyote to walk through that he's already walking through and go, I like it here. I'm going to spend an extra 3 days chewing on this gut pile. Now, if you want to hunt over it, make sure it's legal, but that's a great option. I don't think it's legal here to hunt over a carcass. I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. It's legal in Minnesota. As far as I know, I've never been told no. But
Sure.
it's as simple as, if you're going to gut your deer in Minnesota and hunt over the carcass or put a trapper on the whatever's left, have a specific spot where you dump the parts, right? So if you have 80 acres of land, have a certain 5-acre chunk where this is where we dump our bones from butchering, we dump the guts, we dump the carcass, we dump whatever here, and now you can set up to snare around it, you can set up to trap around it, you can set up to hunt over it. And that's all not simple to do. Snaring's a little bit easier than trapping, in my experience. I'm not a good trapper. I've caught a few things in a snare. Trapping's got a little more finesse to it. And if you want to get wolves, I know a little bit about trapping wolves because we did have a state trapper come out and teach us how to do it once. We don't do it anymore because whatever, but we did at one point have permission to trap wolves on Dad's property. Trap or snare. And if you're setting for a wolf, you didn't hear this from me. Well, you did, but you didn't. Actually, so with a coyote or a bobcat, you want to shuffle your feet in the snow like we were talking earlier. You want to create a trail. You put your snare on that trail, you'll catch a bobcat every time. Because bobcats are not... They don't like going through where it's hard to walk. And bobcats got them itty-bitty legs, 10, 12 inches long at the most. If you got a foot and a half of snow, they would rather walk right down your trail. So bobcats are very easy to catch that way. Coyotes are easy to catch that way. Fox are pretty easy to catch that way. But if you do that with a timber wolf, you'll never catch a timber wolf on that trail. You cannot walk. A timber wolf will not walk where you walked. So if you want to catch a timber wolf, what you got to do is if you see a set of timber wolf footprints, that's not just a set of footprints. That's a timber wolf trail. If they walk there once, it's a trail. So then you approach that trail from the side. You don't walk right up to it. You come, if this is their trail, you walk around to the side, never step foot on it, set your snare, and go back. And now you can catch them that way. But you can never walk down a timber wolf trail because they won't use it again. Which is frustrating. But we've seen timber wolf trails around here where it looks like one set of tracks, but 6 wolves stepped in each other's tracks and walked right through there. They are absolutely crazy animals.
Yep. Yeah, we don't. I mean, we have a wolf population, but we just don't have. Like I said, when I was up at your dad's there that night, hearing them howl, that's an eerie feeling. I don't like that one bit. I would definitely say, Luke DeBryan, no wolves in northern Wisconsin. I would say we do not have as much of a population as you guys do up in
northern
up by
Minnesota.
your guys'. Yeah, it's scary how many people are there. Do we have wolves? Yes, 100%. Do we have a problem? I think so. I think the biggest problem is that we don't have the control to control.
And we don't in Minnesota either.
No, but I mean, you guys have a substantial issue up there. But it's something you have to manage. I mean, timber wolves, you can't, but there's ways, and manipulating the property is a way to do that. But yeah, if you take out the coyotes and the bobcats and the bears, you can help your herd out substantially, and not giving them anything to hang out on the property with like a gut pile or a carcass pile or stuff, that only helps. Everybody gives me a weird look when I do it. But It makes me feel better.
You're controlling it because even when you shot Ace, you had coyotes eating on him that night.
Yep.
You left him out there overnight, and you had coyotes chewing on him. So for you to have the ability to control where the guts are located, whether you can hunt over it or not, is a big deal. That's just going to make your deer feel more comfortable than if you leave it right by your food plot. Because even, like you said, when you shot Ace, you didn't have deer on your food plot for a week because it shook everything up out there so much because your deer are not used to being pressured, or they're so scared of being pressured that they just leave.
Right. Yeah.
But when you can control that pressure a little bit more by moving your gut piles, not dumping your bones there, moving that to a separate location, even if you have a second piece of property that's not that important for hunting, move it over there. Or if you want to feed that stuff to your dogs, if they're not coming in the house, that's fine. Because if you feed that to your dogs and they come in the house, that gas, whew, you don't want that. That's bad. Burps, not pleasant.
Luke says, huge problem north of Highway 2. I haven't hunted up there in a while in the Washburn, Barrens, Port Wing, all that area. So I'm not 100% familiar with the problem with the wolf population up there. But yeah, I bet I can see it's a huge problem up there. I remember a story where me and my brother were hunting, and did I tell this story? Maybe I did in a podcast.
Is this the one where the wolves kind of followed you guys out?
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
You did.
That was where Luke's talking about as far as north of Highway 2. And that was, 4 or 6 eyes just do right across there as the truck lights came on. That's eerie. You can't even fathom the numbers of which a pack of timber wolves, what they can do.
There's documentaries of them in Yellowstone. I don't know if they're still out there anymore. They might have took the documentaries down. But there was a documentary that showed how hard the wolves were on the elk population out there. Because at one point, if I remember correctly, somebody will have to look this up if they don't trust me, but if I remember correctly, Yellowstone had a population of elk that sat around 20,000 or so, just a huge elk population in Yellowstone. And they introduced wolves into the area. Within 3 or 4 years, that population was down under 5,000. Just demolished. Because the elk can't handle being predatorized by the timber wolves. And there was video clips of the wolves going out and killing 15, 20 elk and just leaving them lay because they kill for fun.
Yep. Well, and that's the problem with the elk herd over in Clam Lake. What has the advantage, an elk herd or a wolf pack in the woods? Elk like kind of to roam. Do they like timber? Sure. Out in Montana, Wyoming, Arizona, they can be in timber, 100%. I'm not saying they can't, but what has the advantage, a timber wolf or an elk in the woods?
Wolf, they move through there quick.
All day long, yeah. and an elk punches a hole through the snow like no problem, where a wolf can just run up behind. And then he does. He starts nipping at the butt, at the hind legs, hurts them, weakens them. Boom, you got elk for dinner. I mean, that's part of what goes on over in Clam Lake right by me. That's why they put 260 elk there, and we're at 262 elk for the population. Talk about a defaulted failure of a relocation.
And I think people underestimate, too, how much damage coyotes do. Because there used to be... I'll see if I can find the photo here. Yeah, here it is, right here. There used to be a lot of people saying, oh, coyotes don't take big bucks. They just take does and fawns. Really? So this was found on somebody's trail cam here a few years ago. So you have to look at the live stream there, Kyle, to see that. But so this is a deer with his butt getting chewed out. Stop that. By a coyote. Okay? And not only is it a deer, it's a nice little 8-point buck, right?
Yep.
Okay. And this is the final photo of that series right here. So, yeah, coyotes will catch and kill mature bucks.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a whole... All you gotta do is search deer killed by coyotes, and this whole series of photos comes up, and it's absolutely crazy.
Yep, and that when I say they don't just walk up and bite them and then kill them, like, I'm not saying it's that easy,
It isn't, but they do kill them, and that's the thing that people don't realize. They think, oh, the wolves kill the big deer, the coyotes kill the little deer. Coyote will never take out a mature buck. Wolves eat more than elk. Yeah, they eat a lot of deer, they eat a lot of elk, and they can catch them. They're very good at it.
Yep.
But coyotes will catch and kill them too.
Yep. Well, I just sent you that picture tonight of that deer with a big hind leg ripped out of it. It's like, what is that? Is that a coyote on its butt? It got a big mouthful and ripped it? Or is it a barbed wire fence, like you mentioned? I mean,
it could be barbed wire,
but it's a wound.
I feel like it's a coyote. Let me see if I can pull that photo over. Since we're
no, hide my deer.
Hide your deer, fine. I won't pull that one over.
No,
I'll Photoshop it next time and just crop out the circle where the square around the injury, and we can post that later.
Yeah, not the antlers. That's my 5-year-old next year.
There you go.
Maybe not, but let's talk about that for a second, because I mean, we're live and we can talk about the deer showing up after. So if Luke's still watching, he was a good critic when it came to why I shot Ace. He said, don't you want to shoot 5-year-olds? But what the argument was is you can't shoot what's not there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ace is gone. I harvested him on October 28th. It was, I think, 29th, 28th. Now we have 4 or 5 decent deer in that ballpark of Ace.
Mm-hmm.
That now pretty much have the pass if they can survive winter and predators. And I mean, a late bow hunt, which is, I don't think anybody around me bow hunts hardcore, but they're going to make it. Let's just assume I'm going to have 4 or 5 deer that are pushing hopefully substantially better than Ace. And now next year you harvest one, because that was one of my goals, was to harvest every year. So we're going to take the nicest one, or the one that I target, and let's say we harvest that one. Now there's 3 that make it to potentially the next year. So to get 5.5-year-old deer, we need 5.5 years in a funky way. But the year really picked up for bucks. I mean, Ace was kind of the nicest deer on the property that was a resident buck.
Mm-hmm.
But we got 4 or 5 that are just hanging out. I don't know if I want to say that our habitat improvements at 10-point whitetails considerably increased the deer population on the land. I would love to think that.
No, I agree with that, because they're there because you have a food source there. Your food plots still have some activity to them. So they're there because it's getting cold out. They need to eat. You have a resident doe herd. They're like, hey, maybe somebody's going to come into heat in December yet. It might happen. We might get lucky. But either way, we're cold and we're hungry.
And there's bedding. And there's a food source right next. There's multiple food sources next to multiple bedding areas. Why go anywhere else?
Exactly.
And I may have hooked a couple of these deer during the rut, passing through, or during rifle season when they got pushed around.
Mm-hmm.
And they decided to stay. That's how you create a resident buck. Now, what would be great is a 5.5-year-old walks in and goes, ooh, this place is nice, and hangs out. Well, if it happens. But
yeah.
But that's what the goal is. And I really think the property is way more welcoming to the deer now because of all the improvements. I don't think it's ready to be pitched that way, but it's definitely an increase. And if we have a consistent step towards the right direction with this, we're going to do more work this spring. We're going to do more work this winter with more hinge cutting, more pocket bedding. We talked about another food plot just a little bit ago. I mean, it's going to get better. And now the age class will get better. And let's just say all these bucks make it through. I will have 4 bucks at that 3.5 age, 4.5 age that are passable. I can only shoot 1. I mean, that's the limit I've drawn for myself. But there's a lot of deer going in the right direction. So
it's making a difference. It's making an improvement. And yeah, your goal is to shoot 5-year-old bucks, but you can't get there in 1 year, like you're saying. You gotta take baby steps. You gotta do what you can to improve the property, and then once your property is set up for it, it will happen eventually. You got to get there. But at the same time, you want to harvest a deer every year. Got to kind of play both sides of the fence there.
Yeah, and I hesitated when I said shoot the biggest deer, because next year, let's say I have these 3 or 4 bucks categorized, named, coded, like I know what deer they are.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden this other deer pops up that's just as big. Well, maybe even if it's the nicest buck, what happens if it's only a 2.5-year-old or a 1.5-year-old? And we say half, but first buck, first year, second year, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens if he is the nicest buck and he's very killable? Well, if he's 1.5 or 2.5 and he's very killable, even though he's as big or bigger, maybe you don't harvest him.
Yeah.
Maybe he's last year's fawn. Maybe he's the spike I passed this year. I haven't educated him. He's known nothing but a food plot. He knows the tree stands are there. It doesn't bother him. He wasn't there the night I shot Ace. So he's like, he's uneducated, and maybe he grows and he's competitive in antler size. But maybe I pass on him, and that's why I hesitated saying the biggest deer. Well, that's because the biggest deer might be the youngest deer.
It's possible.
And we want to give him a couple years. And that's why I hesitated with the biggest deer. I'm going to pick the oldest deer. I want to shoot the oldest resident buck on the property. If that's a 120-inch 10-point, because the one that's a 10, let's say he's 120 inches next year. But there's a 120-inch 8-pointer, but I think he's a 1.5 or 2.5-year-old buck. And he's super killable. Maybe we let him go. And that's what you have to be mindful of. I was at the taxidermist because Mr. Jack is home. Jack the Ripper is home.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy with that deer. I have gotten nothing but great compliments, not just from Jim in his work or wall hanger in their work, but the pose. It was a super full upright, shoulder down. Jim said it was a very difficult mount with the turn. It's not 90 degrees. It's almost like a 120-degree turn. But man, it turned out.
It looks fantastic.
Turned out awesome.
Yeah.
So,
and we'll get that hunt video put together here in the next. By we I mean me. Well, I will get that hunt video put together to some extent in the next couple of weeks. At the very, very least, I'll have a short 20, 30-second commercial that will stick out. So, but yeah, that's going to be fun to see and fun to get done. And he looks absolutely fantastic. I don't think my taxidermist brother, who is doing a Euro mount for me, I think he's doing that. I don't know. He took my buck's head out of the freezer, and it was on the floor in the shop with a collection of like 7 or 8 other bucks that he was going to do Euro mounts on. So I'm assuming he's going to be nice to me and give me a Euro mount for free. But we'll figure that out.
Where I was going with Jack was I was at the taxidermist picking up my deer, and there was a buck there. It was like 14 points. The tallest tine was 5 or 6. He was 16 wide. His bases were a hair bigger than my thumb. What's that tell you, Dylan?
So tine length's 5 or 6. He's 14 points, 16 wide with very little mass.
Yep.
Sounds like a 2-year-old. It's too big to say yearling. Kind of. But not really. I've heard of really big yearlings being harvested, but like, yeesh.
But man, already, I mean, he had points coming. I mean, he wasn't typical. He had kickers and splits, and he had all sorts of character. But you could just look at the deer, and he was so young.
Yeah.
And we talk about that deer looks big, and compared to Ace, compared to your 8-pointer, I mean, that's the bigger buck. That's the buck you want to kill. But man, if you see that on the hoof, you're like, he's young and he's already there.
You want him to grow.
Yes. Even it's almost a sacrifice, but even if you never harvest that animal because he becomes mature and he doesn't get killed, he dies from whatever reason, he bred. And if that deer is 2 like that and he bred,
and you can do that 2-year-old a favor by removing a 3-year-old competition.
Absolutely.
Do him a favor. Let him become the dominant buck. Let him breed. If he's that good and he's obviously a younger deer, You want that bigger, younger deer to do as much breeding as possible.
Yep. And we always talk about age. From my understanding, my oldest buck is 5.5 years old. On my Euro wall, he is the smallest deer. He is a 7-pointer, but his mass is considerably bigger. I would say a $50, maybe a little bigger, and it goes all the way through. It's not just at the bases; it goes all the way through. But he's a little 7-pointer. He's 14 inches wide, 16 on the outside, 14 on the inside. I would say.
Yeah.
But you looked at the body via trail camera photos, and you just seen big, mature neck, swollen, little bit of a belly. I mean, not a straight back. I mean, he stood next to other bucks that had bigger racks, and he was as big or heavier looking. And he was smarter than a whit. Oh, that deer stressed me out. But he was lucky. I named him Lucky because he was lucky 7.
Yeah.
But that was a 5.5-year-old buck, smallest rack you could ever believe. But it was the hardest deer to hunt. But I'm sure he had poor genetics. People seen a 6 or a 7-pointer and passed him at 2, 3. He probably got smart at 4. He was extremely smart at 5, to the point where I couldn't get him to come into the bait. In Wisconsin, you can bait 2 gallons in some counties, which in Bayfield County, I can. I couldn't get him to come into the bait till it was too dark, and I had to sit there and watch his silhouette in the snow because he wouldn't come in. And one night he came in, I seen his head pop over the ridge, and he actually walked back and forth for about 10 minutes till it was dark and then came in. I ended up killing that deer by taking a hang-on stand. I was in a box blind because it was late. It was almost Christmas, I think. I got a hang-on stand, walked over. The bait was at 20 yards, I would say. It was bow hunting, obviously. I went probably another 20 yards to the top of that ridge where I seen him walk behind. And I climbed that tree and set up my stand. And on a cue, he came walk, because they do get pretty predictable during winter because they're eat, sleep. That's only life. I watched him basically get up out of his bed, walk up. He was in a straight line to the bait, stopped at that ridge, and walked away from me. Turned around and walked back. And when he walked back, he came within 20 yards, but he was just waiting until it got dark. Bow, whack, smoked him. Not that that's this crazy smart idea on how to kill a deer, but I did change. I got aggressive. I knew what he was doing, how he was doing it, but he showed he was a 5.5-year-old buck. But the rack was nothing. I mean, in comparison. But if you're at your land and you have a 2.5-year-old that's 14 points, 16 wide and spindly, or you have a buck that is a small 7-point rack but mass and a mature body, and you can guess he's 4.5, 5.5, he is the one you want to get rid of. He may not be the
breeding anymore.
You don't want him breeding anymore. He's going to breed. He's going to beat the living crap out of the other little buck, bigger rack, little body. If he's 200 plus pounds and the other one's a $140, who's going to win that fight? But you may not be so happy to hold the pictures. Look at this little buck I shot, but post. Look at this 5.5-year-old buck I shot. You know, who cares what the antlers are? It's a 5.5-year-old mature, educated, smart, in my book, Northern Wisconsin buck. Be proud of that, you know. But give your young, good genetic deer a chance.
And this is why I dislike an APR system, because of this very thing. So with an APR system where they say you got to have 4 points on one side, there's probably several years of that 7 points life where he didn't have 4 on one side. So he couldn't be harvested at all. But then this younger buck that you saw at the taxidermist, 1.5, 2 years old, he would fit right away. He fits in that 4-point category. He gets harvested. Your better deer, you harvest your better deer first under an APR. So if you got a good yearling, you got a good 2-year-old, they're the first ones to get harvested. And that encourages lesser genetics. It can. I'm not saying it does this 100% of the time, but it can, especially in this type of situation that we just laid out, where you have Lucky 7, who's a 7, he's not that great. If he was a 6 for 3 of those years, he couldn't be harvested. Or would you harvest him if you're under an APR, you see him, You see the other one, well, most guys are going to take the better buck. But if you want to talk about setting your property up for success and getting better deer in the future, you sometimes got to take one for the team and take out a lesser animal. And now we don't know every buck's genetics. We don't know their history. I would never judge a yearling. Don't ever judge a spike buck. Spike bucks are not spike bucks for life. They have issues most of the time. So at my dad's this year, I sat bow hunting one time and I put the video up on our Facebook page. I saw 6 yearling bucks at one time. 3 of those were spike bucks. 2 of those were pretty nice and one was kind of mediocre. But the 2 pretty nice ones, they're little 6, little 8 pointers. They're like this. I can't say that they're better genetically than the spike bucks I saw, because I don't know their history. Did their mom get killed by a wolf when they were 2 months old? Did their mom get killed by a car when they're 2 months old? Were they born late? Were they born in mid-August? Went into Minnesota winters at 45 pounds? What's their history? We don't know. People still see deer with spots. 2-3 weeks ago, somebody posted a photo of a fawn with spots. That fawn could have the best genetics in the world. He's going to be a spike buck his first year of life. Because Minnesota winters suck.
Yep.
So there's a lot going on with that.
And here's an argument to have. I mean, I hate to say it and yell at me if I'm wrong, but that spike you see could be this year's fawn. No? No?
Sorry.
Never?
The best genetics we ever had on the farm in ideal circumstances, his nubbins were this big.
Okay.
And you know who that buck was?
Wait, don't.
So, for those of you watching that don't know, if you haven't figured out that I was at one point a deer farmer in my life, you're late to the party. Raised deer for 20 plus years, give or take, my whole life. This buck here, I gotta back up, he's too big, was a buck we called Double XL, and this is him at 1.5 years. He is one of the very few bucks that we ever got to collect the nubbins off of. And I think I have one of his around here somewhere. It's about the size of a thimble. So your first year fawns, if they're born in June or July, they're going to have nubbins. Those are our button bucks. They will never have antler on them like this. They're just not going to. Because this is some of the best genetics we've ever had on the property. This buck was 400 plus inches at 4 and 5 years of age. He's 160 at 1.5 years. It's just not going to happen. I've never seen it happen. So for a button buck to be substantially big enough where it's considered antlers, is very few and far between. So it's just a bad yearling if they're like this big.
Well, that's good, because I'm not the only one to think that, and I'm not saying I'm some crazy like deer scientist, but I've talked to people and they're like, well, it's this year's fawn, that's why they're spikes, next year he'll be a 6, etc., etc. Because we have a healthy population of spikes here. Healthy population of spikes.
It's not genetic. It's lack of food and too much pressure.
Sure.
I would bet that's 90% of your problem, because I've been out to your property. I've seen your area. There is no food. And if a fawn's going through his whole first year of life and the best thing he can find to eat is twig ends all winter and whatever little forage he can reach in the summer, he's not getting the nutrition he needs to grow a nice set of antlers. So it'll be interesting to see your yearlings on your property next year after having access to good food all year this year and all year next year. I bet you have yearling 6s and maybe even yearling 8s.
Well, that's the hope. That's the goal. Especially having continuous food through the winter. You talk about the fawn's first year, but talk about that doe's time of conception to when she words, Kyle. Good thing we're live. If anybody wants to know, my dog just walked into my room and was sitting right next to me, hanging out. So, but you talk about the fawn's first year of food, but what about that doe once she's bred up until giving birth?
The gestation
what
period.
Happened? the gestation period, what happens when she is struggling for food all winter? Harsh winter, hard winter, no food. Does that fawn have a chance?
Well, interesting thing, and I think we've talked about this before. When a doe conceives, I think it's about 95% of the time it's twins that they conceive. Now, if she's struggling in the winter, she'll actually absorb one of those fawns to help her body get through the winter, and then she'll have a singleton. So if you're having a singleton, that means one of two things. Either the doe is young, yearling does will often just have singletons. Just because they're yearling does, they're little, that's just the way they are. And that's, when I say a yearling doe, I mean a fawn that was born in May, June, or July, gets bred in December or January. That's often a singleton. If it's a singleton otherwise, that means that it was a hard winter, she absorbed her fawn. Now so she can focus all of her energy onto one fawn. And if she's still not getting enough food, there's a possibility she absorbs both fawns and then has no fawns. But either way, I mean, if you took a pregnant woman and withheld food from her, nutrition, that infant isn't going to be as healthy as it could have been. And it's going to have a rough start to its life from there on out. Same thing with deer. If a doe is struggling, her fawns aren't going to be as strong, they're not going to be as healthy, their chance of living upon birth are going to be lowered. It's already low. Fawns have such a tough time making it. It's crazy. You can look at a fawn wrong and they die. I know this from personal experience. It's rough. It's very rough to be a whitetail fawn. So best thing you can do for your deer herd, two things. Feed them, kill predators.
So would you say, I have a doe, she's bred by this buck, genetics are this, fine. She's bred, she has a harsh winter, she absorbs a fawn, and she produces a buck fawn. Okay? He's born. So that's that point. Now he's born there. But the same doe gets bred by the same buck. She does not struggle. Okay? She eats. She's plentiful. She's got all the egg in the world, all the food in the world. She gives birth to twins, obviously. One's a buck fawn. Do you think those two bucks, those buck fawns, grow to be the same deer? Same conditions, except she struggles or she doesn't struggle. So, she struggles to the point where she absorbs one. His genetic makeup's the same.
Genetic makeup's the same. It's going to have a lot to do with their... So if you say the only difference in those two fawns is their pre-birth.
Yep, just
if they get everything beyond that, they get the exact same food sources, access to everything.
Yep.
The lesser fed fawn, the singleton, should catch up in about a year to 2 years. Probably about 2 years. It should catch up. But so that first year, it should be a spike buck.
Okay.
And then the second year, it should be close, I would bet. Now, I haven't seen this firsthand. This is off my own personal opinion.
Yep.
But I feel like it should catch up. Not right away, but it should.
So if the genetic makeup is the same, and you let that buck mature, he shouldn't be hindered his entire life.
He shouldn't be. His first year is going to be rough, but they should catch up because... Okay, for a human example, I was born very much underweight, like 3 pounds, a few ounces. I mean, I was small, and this maybe isn't a great example. All my brothers are 6'2" or more. I'm stuck at 5'8". Now, is that because my mother is 5'4", and I just took that into the genetic spectrum? I look more like her and her side of the family. I look a lot like my dad too, but I'm similar to her side of the family, and the rest of my brothers are all 6'2". Now, from a genetic standpoint, we're all technically the same, right? From a circumstance standpoint, we're all technically the same. We all had the same food and everything growing up. But from a birth standpoint, I was born significantly smaller. don't know if that's why I'm short or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and I mean you can see it. Um, I think on the farm, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have had the same buck breed the same doe over years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Double XL bred a lot of does, and probably the same does after year after year. It's not like once. I mean, they can be bred every year,
Mm-hmm.
so he's probably gotten the same does.
Yeah, he got the
But
same doe multiple times, and their offspring often they weren't mirror images of each other, but they were similar enough. Where like, yeah, they're brothers.
yeah, well, deer antlers, and this is why I have an obsession with antlers because there are no. You could clone a deer. You could clone an 8 pointer. He's going to be different. His clone is going to be different. Antlers are just that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's no two antlers identical except for those two 8 pointers, except for Ace and that buck I got the other day or 2 weeks ago. They're freaking twins. I swear to God. But that's why I love antlers because the same double XL breeds the same doe 2 years in a row. They don't come out the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same dad, the same mom, same food at the farm. I mean, nothing's changed there. I mean, maybe a stress or a demeanor or something like that, but it's not like the product is exactly the same during breeding. So,
You want to hear a really weird one?
sure.
I'm pretty sure these were double XL sons. I'd have to check way back and verify that. Double XL lived to be 5 years old. He died 7-8 years ago. So this is long time ago. But we had two bucks that were born, twin buck fawns, and at 3 years of age, one of them, and I have pictures of these deer. I can't find them right now, but I should find them and post them side by side. One was about this wide, 16 inches wide. Tines, I mean long tines. He scored 303 inches. Just waves of it tines. Twin brother. Womb sibling. Was like 24 inches wide. Nice, big, cleanish, typical. 240 some inches. Twin brothers. Completely different deer.
That's I mean, I hate to say it this way, but that's you and Brody.
Yeah.
That's it. The genetic makeup, it's the same pieces, but you can put it together differently.
Mm-hmm.
I know two brothers that the older brother looks exactly like his dad. He's got the same demeanor. He's got the same look. He's the same height. He is his father's clone in a younger version. And his brother, who's 2 years younger than him, shorter, a little chunkier. He mirrors his mother. His demeanor is his mother. He's a little, he's that way. And they're the same people. They're from the same people,
Mm-hmm.
but those building blocks get stacked in a
And that's
different
why
manner.
people are all unique and deer are all unique, and that's the whole thing there. So with raising whitetails, we learned a lot about antlers and development. We had one buck that when he was 4 years old, I think he got harvested. I think he was 378 inches, give or take, massive deer. But if you took, I don't remember if it was right or left, but say if you took his right side, it looked almost identical to a double XL antler. If you took his left side, it was almost identical to a bonehead antler. And those bucks were both in his pedigree. But he just said, okay, well, this side's this buck, this side's this buck. And he grew them. It's crazy. Deer are absolutely crazy. It's what they're capable of, how big they can get, and anything that we can do to assist them with feed and helping the does and getting everything all knit back together here to feeding your deer encourages healthy deer. Feeding your does encourages healthy fawns. Feeding your does while they're taking care of your fawns encourage healthy yearling deer. And now healthy young bucks grow to be healthy big bucks. It's just a continual thing. So if you can feed your deer, whether it's microplots, whether it's full food plots, whether you can feed ag products all year round or not, or 8 months out of the year when you're not hunting, anything you can do is going to help. And their nutrition needs change. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was wondering, why don't my deer get big? My neighbor's deer 3-4 miles down the road, they get pretty big. My deer don't get big. But we have all this ag. It's all ag. Is there something that could be missing? And I told him, go test your soil. Dad found out, might not have this 100% right. So don't quote me on this, but Dad tested his soil here a year or two ago, and we've grown fantastic deer at Dad's. And he found out that his farm-raised deer were missing copper. There was no copper in our soil. So he started adding a little bit of copper to the feed, and there was a noticeable change. Not like by tens of inches, but noticeably the deer were a little bit healthier. Our fawn crop was a little bit stronger just by adding in one thing. So it doesn't hurt if you're going to really focus on feeding your deer. Test your soil. See what they could be missing. So I told this guy, go test your soil and find out what they have, and we'll, get a hold of me and we'll converse and see what they could be missing. And it's not, if you're feeding deer anyway, it's not hard to mix in a little bit of mineral.
Absolutely. I know we're rolling about an hour, so I don't know how long we want this live to go, but I do want to thank and congratulate everybody that did the online buckboard or big buck contest. I actually met with Craig today, who won with a 18-inch 8-pointer, 9-pointer. Oh, I don't remember now. Shame on me.
He won.
So Craig won. Forrest Schultz. So Craig won. He got the $500 cash grand prize. Dropped that off today with him. Forrest Schultz won with what I would call a considerably non-typical deer that had 11 points and 15-inch spread.
That was second place.
That was second place. I actually got to see that rack at the taxidermist because he went to Wallhanger Taxidermy.
Hey, shout out Wallhanger. It's not sponsoring us anymore, but shout out Wallhanger Taxidermy.
I'm sure he would. We just so I seen Forrest, so he's got a tacked cam. He's actually going to pick up his mount from Jim at Wallhanger. Awesome. And I'm going to drop off the camera with him, so that'll be cool. And then Tony Merrill got third place with a 10-point, 9-point. It was a 10. It was a beautiful 5x5 animal, but it busted off its last G4. So it was a scoreable 9 with 15-inch spread. He got third. Honorable mention goes to Tim Olson, who shot a decent deer. It did get bumped. And then Brian shot a fantastic 8-inch wide 5-pointer.
Yep.
Right?
Beautiful deer. Yep.
Beautiful. I thought it was going to win it for a little bit there.
He was in the lead for a few days.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Minnesota was disappointed. So Minnesota got Brian
and Tim.
And Tim, and the rest was Wisconsin. So shout out to Wisconsin.
Somebody or two people in Tim's family, after the buckboard was over, both harvested fantastic bucks that probably would have won.
Yeah.
So yeah, Minnesota disappointed during the contest, but after the fact, those guys kicked it into gear.
Well, we're gonna post. Thanks to everybody for the buckboard. Any suggestions, email or text or message saying how I've heard people say we want it year long,
season long. Oh, did we lose Kyle? Kyle froze. Okay. Well, if Kyle comes back, we'll see here in a minute. But yeah, we should try to see, should we run one buckboard for the full season, all of the seasons, or should we run an archery specific and rifle specific? We got to talk about these things, and we're going to figure out more as we go along. But I think we're going to end our live video here. So for those of you that tuned in, thanks so much for tuning in. We will probably do a live again. We had fun. We had some good comments, good people tuning in. So we'll probably do this in the future. But otherwise, Lessons of the Woods by 10 Point Whitetails is a weekly podcast that, unless we're doing a live, hey, there he's back on a different device. Unless we're doing a live, I'm removing your other one from the call. There we go. So I was just going to close out here. So I've said briefly there that if we do one next year, or when we do one next year, we're going to talk about, should we do an archery only? Should we do a full season for everything? Should we do archery and rifle, two separate ones, how we want to do that? And then we're going to close out here by, unless you got any closing statements, I'll do our ending spiel.
Just the end of the buckboard was exactly that. Anybody wants to suggest things, we want to do it again next year. But I also wanted to shout out to a few people. Evelyn Sanda, she shot a nice deer before the buckboard. My sister-in-law Jessica shot a beautiful nut deer. She was not on the buckboard, even though it would have been on the buckboard. Congratulations to Tim Olson, who won the domain package. And who won the knife? John?
John Mueller?
Mueller.
I think that's how you
Mueller?
pronounce it. Mueller.
So
From
just
Houston County, Minnesota.
There was quite a few people that shot some deer. Wish they had been on the buckboard, but shout out to all of them for the harvest. I know a couple buddies of mine, are still trying to hunt and get a late season deer. But just shout out to them guys. We posted a couple beautiful deer that got shot. And the one that got away, maybe, that daylight picture of that stud, your buddy sent you.
Oh, yeah. He hasn't gotten them yet. He has not.
Lots of people
messaged
me. Lots of people messaged me going, where's that deer at? Where's that deer at? I'm like, not in the state of Wisconsin.
We were asked to not share that information for good reason.
Yep, that's a beautiful deer. So that's just all I want to say was thanks for everybody that did the buckboard. I consider it a success. We plan to do it next year, but there may be some tweaking to the season, the length, the prizes. We're going to start working now on gathering some prizes and whatnot for that. So that's just thanks for everybody that did it and joined. It was fun. It was great.
It sure was. So yeah, Lessons of the Woods here is a weekly podcast. You can find us on almost any of your podcasting apps, any of the good ones anyway. You can find us on YouTube and Facebook. If you have any questions or comments for us, leave them below this episode on any of the places where you find it, or send us an email at 10pointwhitetails@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to answer it or bring it up on the next episode. So we're going to record one more tonight, and then we're going to start talking about getting guests on here. And for those of you that know my dad, Mr. Steve Porter of Steve Porter's Trophy Whitetails, should he be our first guest? Maybe.
Is it fitting?
Well, we bashed the DNR last episode, so we can get him on here to do it again.
What's he going to talk about?
Well, I mean, he's got more to talk about on that front than we do.
I definitely do. I think Steve Porter should be definitely either not the first honorable inaugural guest, but I think it's well deserving that we get him on. I'd love to hear everything he's got to say. So
yeah, and shout out to Jordan Latola. I'm sorry, man, if I mispronounced your name. He was on here earlier, and he actually did send me a text message saying he enjoyed it before his kids drug him away from it. But he is with Haunted Outdoors. Might be fun to get him on here. So I'm actually going to message him back about that here when we get off. So
absolutely, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fun. It's the off season, so we're going to have the video for Jack the Ripper. We're going to have the video of Ace at some point. And we're going to start focusing on consulting in the spring and getting on that. So if you need some help, have questions, maybe message us, email us. Our phone numbers are out there, so give us a call if you want to talk about it. And if you want us to get on boots on the ground this spring and help you try to do some of this stuff that we talk about, let us know.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll see you guys next time.